making because Mary was from the folk tradition and she needed some ballads. The jam was great and we had a lot of fun. And you can hear it, I think, on the record.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Donovan. I grew up in the 60s, and I love your song, Mellow Yellow. Is it true during that part where someone says, "That's right, slick," in the verse, was that Paul?
Quite rightly. A lot of people
Quite
think...
right, slick.
Quite rightly.
Was that Paul?
Yeah, a lot of people think that was Paul. I don't know where the story came from. No, Paul is doing the funny Spike Milligan sounds in the solo. Mellow Yellow! And doing a lot of hooping and eyeing and clapping along. We didn't share a vocal, which is unfortunate, but we did sing a lot together on that bootleg. There's some parts of it that we're singing together. No, he didn't do quite rightly. I did. But he gave the party vibe.
I'd like to thank you for signing my stuff. You know, I brought a few things and signed.
I
I got a
remember you.
question. One thing is, on this album called Donovan,
Yeah.
you've got a guy called Isaac Gilroy, and you would remember him from the old Crying Shames. I mean, in their day, they were really big around here.
Really?
I don't know if it was a management or somebody, why they didn't go national and big. But do you have any stories or do you remember him? And did you know that he passed away like about 2 years ago?
No, I didn't.
And why is he credited on the back and his picture's not in it? All the guys are standing there and Isaac's not in there.
Right. Well, he'd be what we called a session friend rather than in that particular lineup, because that particular lineup is some from Stone the Crows. I think there's a couple from Stone the Crows there. And we were putting this album together. Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, we were putting this album together and that band to go out on the road. But Isaac was not going on the road, this band was. So he joined as a session guy. And I found him to be a very fine guitar player, especially in the jazz style of chords that he used. I liked him. It's a shame he's passed over. Oh well. Thanks for the story.
Hello.
Hey.
I can't say that I have favorites of your songs because I think I love them all, but now that you have Kelly by you, I would like to see if you can sing for me with Kelly, Celia of the Seals, which is one of my favorites.
Which is that?
Celia of the Seals.
Oh, Celia of the Seals. One, I can just give you a little bit because we've got to move on. But let me see if I can remember it. Should you wander this land to the north, and few seldom do, should you follow the song of the gull to enchanted western isles, with a fisherman to take you out, where the silky seals are seen, hear the stories that they tell about the maiden who is their queen. The maiden who is their queen. Celia of the Seals, who knows just how to feel. Celia of the Seals, Celia of the Seals. And that Celia was Celia Hammond, the great English model friend of my wife, who had a partnership with Jeff Beck for so many years. Celia is now a great environmentalist, and that's my story of Celia.
Great.
My favorite movie is Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. You wrote that. Probably not a lot of people know that about that, but you wrote the soundtrack.
Yes.
How do you come to write that, and where can you buy it? I can't find it anywhere.
Well, you can check out the site soon, donovan.ie. It's for Ireland, IE, donovan.ie, and the site will be exploring all that this year. And it is true, it was never a soundtrack. But I was asked by Franco Zeffirelli, the great Italian director, to come up with the music for the story of St. Francis of Assisi, who was in the 13th century an extraordinary event which came out of nowhere, as it were, and inspired thousands of young people to follow the new, really, really new, rediscovered story of Christianity through this young man called Francis. And Francis had a mother from Provence. And in the 13th century, the troubadour music of Provence was extraordinarily influential, and still is. And so she knew all the Provençal troubadour ballads, and she sang them to him as a child. And Franco and his team realized that I was showing similarities to the story of St. Francis by being a troubadour in the 20th century, introducing to thousands of young people a way of looking at nature as Francis was, introducing in the 13th century his stories of Brother Sun and Sister Moon, and his great poem, The Canticle of the Creatures, where he made a poem, and I'm sure these poems were sung to melodies that his mother taught him when he was in his cradle. So Franco introduced me to the story, and I slotted in easy. But check the site soon, because I'm trying to get it out. Hi.
Hi, I was wondering, the song Mellow Yellow, I was wondering how you came to call the song Mellow Yellow.
Do you know, the word mellow is part of my music, laid back, cool, relaxed. But the mellow sound of jazz, I went down to New Orleans as soon as I could in the 60s, and when I did a gig there, and I went to Preservation Hall, and that's where the old Dixieland players were playing, and I listened to the soft shuffles of jazz. I love jazz anyway, especially traditional jazz, early jazz. And the mellow sound, I loved it. And I have a trick with words: Jennifer, juniper, sunshine, Superman. I love alliteration, where you put two words together, and mellow and yellow seem to work very well. Although Paul used to kid me, he said, yellow submarine, mellow yellow. You know, we used to steal words from each other, and we'd steal chords from each other, so maybe I stole the word yellow from Paul. But then I wrote one of the lines in Yellow Submarine, so that's okay. I guess I traded it. But the mellow yellow idea was jazz. As I said earlier, it was to do with painting as well. I use a lot of colors in my song. Good question.
Which line from?
Oh, in Yellow Submarine. I think I'm going to have to save that. Okay, I'll do it. I can't do it without telling you a story. I told you that Paul and I wrote songs all the time. In 1966, I guess, I was in my flat in Maida Vale, and he was living around the corner in St. John's Wood. And it was Sunday, and it was sunny, and believe it or not, there was no cars on the Edgware Road. So in 1966, it's hard to believe, but this main road that I lived on was no cars. And I was in my flat, sitting on the floor cross-legged, on my tatami mats, my Japanese tatami mats. In the corner was my brass bed. I had my cultures a little bit mixed up then when I was young. A brass bed on tatami mats. Anyway, it was my Victoriana and my love of Japanese Buddhism. There it was, in that one room. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor with my little Yua tape recorder, writing songs. And there was a knock at the door, or the bell. Ring. I went, and it was Paul McCartney. I said, hello, Paul. He said, what you doing? I said, writing songs. He said, so am I. Can I come in? I said, come in. So we sat there, and he turned to me, and he said, what do you think of this one? I said, okay, let me hear it. It goes, Olanatunji, blowing his mind in the dark with a pipe full of clay. What can you say? Olanatunji, Olanatunji. Of course, we all know what that turned out to be. But often we patch words together and we don't really have words, we just stick them together. The famous other one, I guess, is Yesterday. Didn't Yesterday begin as ham and eggs? Da 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 da, ham and eggs. It was probably written at breakfast. So here was Unlana Tunji. And then he said, and I've got this other one. Sounds good, Paul. Da, 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 da. We all live in a yellow submarine. I said, that's a good song. Yeah, he said, but I'm missing a verse. I said, what? Paul McCartney? Missing a verse? Says I to myself. I thought, what do you mean? He said, maybe you could come up with one of the song verses. And I said, okay. Give me a minute. And I was a bit shocked. And I was very pleased as well. Here I was being asked to fill in. I'd heard various other members of the Beatle entourage had added little words here and there. And so I went in the bedroom very seriously. I said, okay. So I came in the other room and I sang it, and he said, that'll do. And so I entered the history of writing with the Beatles, but others had come up. Do I believe things like, stories like a sculptor friend, David Wynne, who did the 4 Beatles with their heads together in '65. I don't know whether you've seen that sculpture. I don't know whether it's part of Mark's archive, that there was a sculpture made of the 4 Beatles' heads. No? Well, this story I heard may be true and may be not true, but it's an interesting story of adding words. And David Wynne was in the hotel in Paris modeling for the sculpture, and the 4 boys were in the suite there, and they were literally locked into this hotel. There was 200 fans outside, probably with scissors. 200 young girls with scissors is quite a challenge. And so nobody could move anywhere, David said, so he was modeling the heads. And I guess 2 guys, I guess John writing a song, you know, Berlin, I need somebody, Berlin, not just anybody, Berlin, I need somebody, Berlin. We need a word there, don't we? Berlin, I need, Ringo, what's the word? And Ringo looks out the window at 200 fans with scissors down below and says, help. True or not, it's funny, and Mal Evans added a few words over the years as well. Was it Ringo that said, got the phrase, a hard day's night?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Anyway, that's that Liverpool humour at work. But then, in that flat, 66, the doorbell rings again. And I go to the door, and it's a young policeman. And he's got a uniform with a bobby's hat, you know, the London policeman's hat. And Paul comes up behind me and leans over my shoulder, and the cop, the policeman, looks at him and goes, oh, it's you, Mr. McCartney, and stands to attention and salutes. I look at Paul and I say, my God, these Beatles, you know, it's like... And the policeman says, is that your car down there, Mr. McCartney? The Aston Martin? I said, yeah. With one wheel on the pavement and one wheel off? Yeah. With the door open? Yeah. And the radio on? Yeah. And the policeman turns to Paul and says, if you give me the keys, Mr. McCartney, I'll park it. This is God's honest truth. And I went, and he took the keys out and gave them. The policeman came back, and I said, see you later, Paul. He said, see you later, Don. And that was the end of that day.
And that, unfortunately, is the end of our session because you have places to go.
Yes.
But this has been wonderful. You'll be back tonight for your tribute to George
Yeah, I'm going to
Harrison.
do a little short tribute to George, but it'll be packed full of stories and details and a very rare song, which I wrote for George when we met, called Epistle to Scows. Scows is the colloquial description of a fella from Liverpool, Scows. And it's been heard maybe 3 times in the world, last time at this festival in New York area, and maybe 2 or 3 other times just in private. So I'm going to unleash that, and the lost verse that George wrote for Hurdy-Gurdy Man. See you then.
Thank you, Donovan. Donovan, thank you.